The problem in health is not science and technology.
We're used to having these governments that are not non-for-profit entities that basically raise money via taxes and then use it to create havoc and slow down science and do all sorts of non-productive things. So I always wanted a way to escape that.
Innovation was killed by the FDA, right? mRNA technology existed for 20 years. It was stopped from coming into the market by the regulators, by the FDA. And so, okay, they flipped a switch, but why didn't they flip that switch 50 years ago?
Prospera, as Lonis said, it's a platform for shorting the Fed, the FDA, the FAA, the NRC, and that's specifically through the mechanism of the regulatory flexibility, right? So that mechanism is intended to create a market system of institutions that sort of create the safety protections. My goal with Infinita City is really to develop a new go-to-market for biotech that shortens the timeline from 10 years to 1 year.
Most scientists do not even consider trying or translate their research into actual treatments. But Prospera or Infinita offers a really good option for these scientists or these companies to go there, get it reviewed, get it approved. But it allows you to skip a lot of the bureaucracy or basically to accelerate the process so that you can obtain your initial data much quicker and at a much lower cost.
We aim to build a network of hubs that is competing with San Francisco and San Diego and Boston for biotech talent. Like you need to go to Infinita City to build a world-class biotech company.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to DeSci Pilled. I am your host, Ryan Bethencourt. I am here with three incredible innovators and entrepreneurs. Can't wait to discuss everything that they're doing. As a quick reminder, because we cover everything from science, innovation, all the way through to crypto, this is never medical or financial advice, just edutainment. And let's get it kicked off. So, Zoe, do you want to give us a little intro on yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. And hello, Ryan. Thanks so much for inviting me on the pod. Super excited for this conversation. I'm Zoe. I'm the founder of Aevitas House, which is a network of talent incubation houses focused on longevity science. And it is one of the startups that came out from the Infinita Accelerator. I am also a pop-up city organizer, conference organizer, have a lot of experience in this space. And I've lived in Prospera and Infinita City for around 8 months now. So I'm going to share with you guys the first-person perspective of what it's like to live and build in Prospera and Infinita.
Amazing. Thank you, Zoe. And I know this is going to be very interlinked, so I think there's going to be a really interesting conversation around longevity and why we need these autonomous zones. And so kind of linking that, Lonis, do you want to give us a little overview of yourself and then a quick intro to Prospera, and then we'll move on to Niklas as well?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Ryan. So I'm Lonis. I'm a VP of growth here at Prospera. I have a background as a tech entrepreneur. I started a few AI companies. And just 8 months ago, before I was moving here, I was actually about to move to San Francisco to relocate to the headquarters there with my previous AI company. And, I've always been interested in figuring out how to essentially be short the government. If crypto is the way to be short the Fed, I wanted a way to be short the entire system. But I never had I never knew exactly how to do it. It was more a philosophical notion. But then just 8 months ago, when I was about to move to the Bay Area, I read about Prospera. And it immediately clicked that this would be the way. So I thought, well, why not stay in Roatán on my way to the Bay Area and kind of check it out? And then when I came here, I fell in love with it. So I ended up leaving the company that we were relocating with, and we're signing my US visa that I just had gotten. And starting here as VP of growth. And I guess the goal is to maximize the GDP here of the zone.
And Lonis, why did you fall in love with Prospera? Like, as a first-time kind of person turning up, an entrepreneur, an innovator, why did you fall in love with Prospera?
Well, really because it's the only real alternative to the current nation state paradigm, right? So we're used to having these governments that are not non-for-profit entities that basically raise money via taxes and then use it to create havoc and slow down science and do all sorts of non-productive things. So I always wanted a way to escape that. And I think the best way to escape it is by creating an alternative that works better and prove that it works better. And, at Prospera, we're creating a for-profit free city, if you will, right? We basically provide the services that the governments traditionally should provide, like security and rule of law, but we provide it in a for-profit manner as a corporation. And this makes our incentives much more aligned with the people who live here. It makes our incentives much more aligned with businesses here because we can optimize for business-friendly regulations. So it was just a new paradigm, and together with the fact that there's only one zone like this in the entire world, unfortunately, I would say. And so we have to make this one count.
Amazing. Thank you, Lonis. And then obviously, Niklas, I would love to get your background and then how this thread goes through all of the things that you've built, right? From the initial first kind of meetings and thinking about autonomous zones all the way through starting, co-founding Prospera, all the way through to Vitalia City as well. So we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. I'm not the co-founder of Prospera.
Okay. All right.
I'm not waiting for Prospera.
early Prospera.
Yeah.
Prospera.
I'm maybe OG in Prospera. I've been here for 3 years. So I think at some point in the future, the same as when people say they've been into Bitcoin in 2011 or 2013 as a badge of honor, they will say, okay, that's the year when I was in Prospera for the first time. So this is a starting point. But thanks for having me, Ryan. My name is Niklas. I'm originally from Germany. I also have a background as a startup operator. Before that, I was actually, though, in public policy and I studied economics. I was always interested in these questions. And also, similar to Lonis, 5 years ago, when the COVID pandemic hit, I was kind of thinking, what's wrong with how things are done, right? So Operation Warp Speed, vaccines, and the public response by governments just seemed to me, okay, this is very bad, right? Can't you do it differently, right? The problems are so obvious, right? So the problem in health is not science and technology, right? Same in, we're much further than what we currently see, but it's just held back by how regulations work right now by several decades.
And Niklas, it's worth for our listeners, because we have, listeners that have deep science background all the way through to crypto or generalists. Project Warp Speed was amazing. It got a vaccine to market within a year, but that mRNA technology existed for 20 years? And it was
more than
stopped.
50 years even.
50 years. There we go. It was stopped from coming into the market by the regulators, by the FDA. Innovation was killed by the FDA, right? And so, okay, they flipped a switch, but why didn't they flip that switch, as you just said, 50 years ago versus,
Another example is Ozempic, right? So the miracle weight loss drug, right? So the technology, the science existed since the 1960s, right? So the first big research study, I think, started in 1976 or in 1983. And then it took and then the first drug was in 1983. And then the first approval for type 2 diabetes by the FDA was 22 years later in 2005, right? So imagine how many diabetes patients in the United States died during that time. It's about 1.4 million. So many of which could have been probably saved if the process was faster or people just had a right to try it, right? Because if it's a risk to your life, you don't have other options. Why shouldn't you be allowed to try? But anyway, back to my background. So I was grappling with these questions, and similar to Lonis, I didn't see a real alternative, right? That's just the world we live in. And then 3 years ago, I discovered Prospera. I read about it on Scott Alexander's famous article. And I came here and I was the first one to organize an independent conference and pitch competition, right? So, which resulted in the Bitcoin Center. I met entrepreneurs like Mac Davis, who were already here before from Mini Circle, so to the longevity and gene therapy side. I decided to start a VC fund called Infinita VC there. And what I kind of saw Prospera as was, as Lonis said, shorting the government, but more so it's a platform for shorting the Fed, the FDA, the FAA, the NRC, right? And that's specifically through the mechanism of the regulatory flexibility, right? So that mechanism is intended to create a market system of institutions that sort of create the safety protections, right? So nobody here is saying we should have an unregulated market, right? Regulations can perform a good coordinative function for multiple businesses, right? So, but it's just better done by way of certificates and through opt-in mechanisms. So the market can kind of sort out what are the higher quality labels and which ones to stay away from because they don't do a good job. So that's what ultimately inspired me to be in Prospera. Again, as Lonis said, it's just a complete paradigm change. And over time, doing the VC fund, I realized that the big opportunity for Prospera and the big markets that I saw was the biomedical and longevity part, right? Simply because, we want to build a growth industry here, but in many of the areas like crypto or hard tech, each company would have to kind of figure out their own clever regulatory hack. Versus in biotech, we can really build one model and apply the same model to hundreds of companies. So my goal with Infinita City is really to develop a new go-to-market for biotech that shortens the timeline from 10 years to 1 year, starting with a hub here in Roatán and Prospera, and then expanding to other jurisdictions that are open and enabling legislation, like Dubai, for example. Bahamas recently adopted new legislation. Montana has the right to try bill. So we aim to build sort of a network of hubs that is competing with San Francisco and San Diego and Boston for biotech talent. Like you need to go to Infinita City to build a world-class biotech company.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly, I think for those of us that have come up through the biopharma industry. So, I spent a decade in the biopharma industry, and it is frustrating. Most people never have to interact with the FDA, but a lot of people don't realize that there are many divisions in the FDA, some of which never approve one drug in the entire year, right? Like it's just so frustrating. And the fact that they can just delay and delay and delay new drugs for various different reasons, right? Like the risk, no one's going to get fired if they don't approve a drug, but if they approve a drug and there's a side effect and it's a bad one, then they might get fired. So there's this kind of very negative externality of like, well, actually, let's not innovate. Let's slow things down. Let's not take risks. And so just being able to triage that and accelerate that. And so would love to, kind of link this in with what you're seeing in the biotech, the therapeutics, the longevity. What are you seeing kind of emerging now as you're starting to fund these companies? And in general, if there's someone out there who's like, hey, I have a great idea. I'm doing research on maybe it's a preclinical drug or it might have a little bit of human data. How should they kind of reach out to you? What are you looking for as well?
Yeah. My recommendation is just to come here and check it out, right? Because it's much easier to show than to tell, because much of what I'm saying sounds like very science fiction. And when I talk to people, many of them are like, and they're looking at me like I'm from another planet. And then you get it if you come here, right? So almost everyone who comes to Prospera for the first time has this experience of epiphany. Whoa, this thing is really happening. There are actual people here. There are actual companies. Like this is not just some sci-fi utopia. This is actually happening. So, and I also think that's necessary. And it's part of the reason why I started Infinita City, is you need a bit of education to get what you can do, right? So Prospera really has designed a really good legal system, but at the same time, it's in meaningful ways different. So you have to understand a bit how common law works, how this regulatory insurance flexibility system works. And the best thing about being here is that you have a community of other highly aligned techno-optimists who are into longevity and into crypto and who are motivating each other to succeed in their companies. So we give each other advice to our pitches. We introduce each other to investors. It has like a very early Silicon Valley vibe. And, you go to San Francisco and for the talent, right? But, probably less than 1% of San Francisco is actually tech entrepreneurs who are doing something exciting. Here in Infinita, the district that we're building in Prospera, it's probably 50% of people are tech entrepreneurs working on something exciting.
I mean, that's really exciting. Increasing density is one of those things. Like I remember when we first started Indie Bio, we started in downtown San Francisco, and that was not a place to do biotech. It was actually South San Francisco in the South Bay where people were doing that, but we brought people from all over the world, and that created this density of innovators that eventually there were a lot of startups in downtown San Francisco, not just biotech, but like obviously tech as well. And so the idea of going to a more dense environment is kind of wild, right? Like just thinking about it, it's like, it's for those of us that love innovation, love biotech, love longevity, it's like really exciting to think that they're actually going to be higher density than even in the Bay Area, which is magical itself, right? And Zoe, like you went there, you lived there for like 8 months. Why don't you tell us your experience? I mean, that's a long time, right? So you're in like a tropical island, right? In Honduras, it's part of the country of Honduras, but in an autonomous zone. You arrive, you're a programmer, you're a longevity person, you're a biohacker. Like what happens next?
What happens next is super exciting. So I can definitely confirm that the talent density is very high. In fact, you, Ryan, know that I'm an SF Maxi, right? I'm a big fan of the Bay Area. But actually, I had never visited the Bay. Like I actually was living in Prospera before I first visited the Bay.
And we met at the Network State conference, right? And so was that before or after you lived in Roatán?
that was after I had already been living in Roatán for around half a year.
Yeah.
But it was very interesting to me because I idealized the Bay Area and San Francisco and all the amazing people that were there. But then at Infinita City, at the first pop-up, which back then was called Vitalia City, I would meet a lot of people coming from the Bay, and they were saying, "This is awesome. This is like the best place ever." And I would say, like, "Wait, but you're coming from San Francisco. Like, isn't it basically the same?" And they said, "Well, kind of, but not quite, because San Francisco at the end of the day is like a city, right? It's like really big. So you still have to like find your people. But in Infinita, you basically, wake up in the morning, go have breakfast with the rest of the community. And it's like anyone that you can start a conversation with in the room is working on some really cool stuff. Like some people are in crypto, some people are in biotech, some people are, I don't know, creating a new city or a new country, like all sorts of crazy things that you can think about. But everyone has something interesting to teach you that you can learn from. So I can definitely vouch for that. And also, the best part about that is if you're building your own project, that is basically the best ecosystem for growth, because any question that you might have, there's always going to be someone in the community who has already had to go through the same process, who has very valuable information, and you can just find them at the co-working. Just stop by the co-working, find some people, ask your questions, and there's always going to be someone who can help you with that. Again, no matter the industry, because there's people coming from all sorts of industries. And yeah, just to wrap up, also I want to mention that I met my co-founder for Aevitas there. we were both living there during the pop-up, and we stayed for we came back for the accelerator month, and we were working first on our own independent idea. So I was looking into a startup to do clinical trials in Prospera, and he was doing something in stem cell and biobanks. And we decided that's where the idea for Aevitas House came out. And yes, we started the first house in San Francisco, but we are going to expand. Yeah.
Amazing. And Zoe, you were there for all of these amazing conferences, right? So I was honestly pretty jealous, like looking at all these amazing conferences happen, like longevity, crypto conferences, all of that sort of stuff. Some of the leading innovators I saw, they were just, like Brian Armstrong was there, a friend of mine, Brian Johnson went, like I know Balaji Naval were there. Like, who did you meet? How did that influence you, as you were thinking about starting things?
Right. Well, again, I think one of the top value propositions is actually the interdisciplinary nature of pop-up cities. The fact that every week or every 2 weeks you have a conference with experts and leading figures from different fields really allows you to, say, expand a lot your perspective of what can be built. So, for example, you might be someone coming from the crypto side who's kind of interested in longevity but don't know much about it, and maybe just being part of these two conferences gives you some good idea to build in DeSci, right? Or the other way around, you're a longevity person coming to the crypto conference. In my case, I definitely can say that I made some very valuable connections, some great mentors, some people who went on to introduce me to other people that for example, when I was doing when I was planning the startup in clinical trials, I obviously interviewed all of the companies who were developing different types of treatments of drugs in Prospera. And I think that would have been much harder to do and to get the right support that I needed if I was not, on the ground. I didn't have these connections. But yeah, I don't know. It's so cool. What can I say? I met so many cool people that I'm still, friends and collaborators with, and I highly recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, my favorite term, I think it was, I don't know if it was Balaji or it might have been Balaji that said that, Silicon Valley has gone to the cloud. Someone from A16, might have been P. Marka, I'm not sure. I don't know if any of you remember that, but it feels very much like what these network cities and network states are becoming. And so, as we're thinking about, obviously crypto is a very important part of this, and, we're DeSci Pilled, so we really care about crypto and where that's going. But just before going to the crypto, what about longevity? Like what have you all seen in the longevity front? What are you excited about with longevity? Obviously, you've been in one of the frontier cities, right? Prospera is a frontier for a lot of the longevity work. What are the most exciting things you're seeing right now? What are you most excited about?
Sure, I can start. So we have a couple of companies that have something that can really move the needle. I mentioned Minicircle already. There's another company called Unlimited Bio that is really innovating on the business model of you providing a longevity cocktail, like a cocktail of therapies, right? Because there's no like one single drug or treatment that will fix everything for you. You need multiple. But it's difficult to do in the United States under FDA because you only get approval for single indications. Right? It's something so simple. Right. So that's very illustrative of what we're trying to do here, of really allowing us to reinvent business models. And also recently we had a really great company called Muse Bio that is really pushing the needle when it comes to extracting high quality stem cells of the same quality as umbilical cord from menstrual blood. All right. So very cutting edge and could have a potentially huge impact, and all starting here. So when it comes to longevity, I'm trying to be a bit agnostic. What is it that finally does it for us, right? Is it going to be the bioengineering approach of like, small molecules, large molecules, gene therapies, cell therapies? I don't know, right? I just know. Or is it like, others try to go the replacement approach, like we replace human organs and things like that. Or, plan B, we do cryopreservation, or even like brain emulation or something like that. But I try to be agnostic to that. My approach is, same as Elon Musk. Okay, what do we need to do to become a spacefaring civilization? Well, we need to reduce the cost to go to space. The unit economics needs to be feasible. What needs to be happen for that? Rockets need to be reusable. And same for longevity, right? So we have a very, very large journey ahead. We're right at the beginning. There's so much we don't know about human biology. It's going to be a huge maze and many different directions to take and a very long mission. But if things are as they are now and it costs like more than 500 million and takes 10 plus years to bring a drug to market, that's just not cost efficient, right? So we need to reduce the costs to be able to do that. And that's when we ultimately have a chance to reach the North Star of like longevity, escape velocity.
I mean, it's shocking, right? When you look at the numbers, $1 to $2 billion to even have a shot at bringing a therapy to market. And then typically the FDA doesn't like these complicated indications like aging. Oh, aging's not a disease. Well, yeah, it's many things, right? So, the FDA doesn't like that. It's like, no, one disease, one therapy. You can't even really mix therapies. When I used to work in drug development, like the fact that you would have to go through clinical trials if you took one approved drug and another approved drug, put them together, that's a new chemical entity. And now you have to go to the FDA and ask for permission again to use these two drugs that are approved, right, together, right? Which is crazy because doctor can prescribe both of them separately, just can't combine them. So the combinatorial mix of longevity, one of my personal favorites around longevity is reprogramming. I think reprogramming is one of the most interesting technologies there is to like taking your cells and reversing the aging on it. I love the regrowing. One of my friends, Martine Rothblatt, who started United Therapeutics, is working on regrowing lungs and regrowing organs in pigs, but also ex vivo as well. And so they actually have a facility here in Research Triangle Park. Super interesting work. Martine said they have an organ manufacturing site, like such a wild idea when you start thinking about it. But the fact that like if someone's having heart failure, lung failure, liver failure, kidney failure, and you could grow these organs, but you can't actually implant them because the FDA won't allow you, being able to go to Prospera. I mean, who wouldn't do that if they could?
Yeah.
Right?
I also want to mention that I think this is my favorite feature and what really attracted me to the ecosystem, where a lot of reasons attracted me to the ecosystem. But the fact that by building this new platform in Prospera through Infinita City, the whole biotech ecosystem, you can massively lower the barrier to entry to new biotechs. Because right now, if you're in the US and, you have some molecule or some treatment that you believe has given you some like higher signal in the lab, and you believe that, this can be very impactful, but you need to do safety and you need to do efficacy tests. And to even get started with those, the bureaucracy takes a very long time. And the amount of money that you need to even just get started and do your first test is very much not affordable for the average scientist, right? So most scientists do not even consider, trying to productize or translate their research into actual treatments. But Prospera or Infinita offers a really good option for, these scientists or these companies to go there and while still following, very high levels of, because you have to still submit. So the process is not that different. You still have to submit your study protocol to an IRB, get it reviewed, get it approved. But it allows you to skip a lot of the bureaucracy, or basically to accelerate the process so that you can obtain your initial data much, much quicker and at a much lower cost. Niklas and Lonis, you have better data on the startups that have been able to really accelerate their trials. But I'm I want to say that I think that's one of the most powerful features of what is being built right now in Roatán at Prospera.
And Zoe, just to add some clarification for people that are listening, an IRB is an institutional review board. It's basically the ethics. It's a bunch of experts, right, that look at a proposal and say whether it's ethical to proceed and safe to proceed with a particular protocol, right? Very important, a very important step. And it's good to hear that it's there. I think that's very important. And I don't know, Lonis or Niklas, if either of you have insights, on companies that have gone through that process and what they've been doing in terms of building real businesses.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so as you said, like in the FDA, it can cost, the most conservative measure is that it costs around $300 million. Basically, you have to pay for the FDA licensing fees, let's say. And then that's not counting the science. So let's say that you're a startup, you try to solve cancer and you raise a $3 million seed round. That's 1% of everything you would have to raise to pay to the FDA alone to get the scientists. So basically this, creates a massive, invisible graveyard, really. But so what we're doing here in Prospera is very, very different. Prospera costs on average maybe $300,000 to basically do whatever studies necessary to get to market.
That's incredible. So just to get everyone an idea, went back in, clinical research. So let's say you're doing a cancer study, it can cost from $100,000 to $1 million per patient to run a clinical study per patient, right? So these studies are not one patient studies. These are 20, 30, 50 patient studies. Yes. And also, the barriers are immense. And even well-funded companies struggle, the Pfizers, the AstraZenecas of the world, they struggle to get the patients because there's so much competition for patients. So those drugs are just sitting there waiting to go through the process when you could do something for like $300,000 is mind-blowing. And how long does that take, Lonis?
It depends on the type of. It might take 4 to 8 months, depending on what's being tested. And kind of,
I think anyone and everyone would be like 4 to 8 months. That's amazing.
Yeah, and the structural difference that makes this possible. It's not that we have a government here in Prospera that is just smarter than other people's government, that we can make better decisions about what is approved and not approved. That's not a sustainable way of. That might give us an edge, the first year, but eventually bureaucracy will take over and we will be no better than others, right? But the key differentiator with Prospera versus traditional governance systems is basically that we don't have these regulatory bodies like the FDA or the Fed or the NRC or the FTC or the FAA. Instead, what we have for these traditionally regulated industries, biotech being one of them, crypto, energy, is that we require companies to have an insurance policy. Basically, the insurance, so we inject market mechanism into this traditional system of regulation, and we say that insurance companies become the experts because they will look through every company and every study and say, is this safe enough for us to provide a policy for and underwrite? Because if it's not safe, we will not give you a policy because we don't want to be in the hook if someone goes and sues you. And so it's this mechanism that makes it so that that we are able to deliver drugs to market very quickly and very cheaply, because these insurance companies, they gotta actually look at the actual risks. They hire experts and they figure out what is the cost,
fascinating,
what is the risk, and what are the benefits.
Fascinating, because we've seen this actually turn out to be true even recently, right? In Southern California, we saw the insurance companies not willing to insure houses that were high risk for fires, right? Correct. In Southern California, they were unwilling to insure them, and unfortunately, many of those houses burnt down. But it was basically they were going off of actual data, like actuaries and actual data in terms of risks. They just found it too risky to insure those properties. They're in the business of insuring, so they want to insure at any price, but they just couldn't do it. And so you're using that same principle, fascinating principle to use. Yeah, no,
as you said initially, right? Nobody gets fired for not approving a drug, but in a regulatory agency. But you do get fired if you don't give a policy when you should give a policy, right? So these insurance companies, they have incentives to develop the right trade-offs. And so currently the insurance companies here, they prefer an IRB. So there happen to be an IRB here created by GARM. But maybe future insurance companies find other ways of validating safety, right? It doesn't have to be a traditional IRB. And so, there's so many ways the system can evolve over time.
Yeah, fascinating. And Niklas, I know when we were talking earlier, we talked about obviously, the broader the need for decentralized science, autonomous zones, but you have a perspective around the liquidity layer and crypto, right? And DeSci. Would you like to kind of expand on that? It's a bit contrarian to, I guess, many other people that are very excited about DeSci.
Sure. And for background, I have most of my assets in crypto, right? So I love crypto.
Yeah.
But I believe in a future where everything is tokenized. I think that's good, right? So we really want to play with these mechanisms and get them right. And, there's the rug pull here and there, the scam and all of that shouldn't distract us from how powerful it is and how it really needs to replace and take over the entire financial system, right? So that's forward. That said, I'm a bit skeptical of much of the first wave of DeSci and what it seems to me kind of identifying funding as the killer app, right? So I'm not sure that's the killer app. Like, I think I'm very bullish on DeSci in a sense that it correctly identifies the right problems, right? So the problem of public funding of science, which leads to bad incentives, so the average age of grant recipients increasing, much of like the replication crisis of scientific publishing and things like that. Intellectual property.
Even access to the data itself, right? Most of that data that's paid for by public taxpayers is behind paywalls in Nature and Science and various other publications, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah. And so that's a huge and important problem space that's correctly, I think, identified by DeSci. And do we solve, how do we solve that, right? So do all of these need crypto? I don't think so, right? So, and is funding like the big unlock? Again, I don't think so, right? So that was kind of my original contrarian thesis, right? Because the problem is the regulatory system, right? So the funding system, we just, it's just a drop on the bucket in the desert, right? And also yes, programmable incentives and all these things are exciting, but in the end, the only thing that gets a drug or something new or an innovation across is the quality of the founder or the entrepreneur, right? And, very high quality founders, entrepreneurs, they're typically not as bottlenecked, right? So I do think there's definitely a case for like the renegade or rogue scientists, right? So I just like to see a bit more experimentation around create kind of an alternative institution for science and fund it. So something like the University of Austin, Texas, something like Emergent Ventures, the Thiel Fellowship, 1517 Fund. To me, these are kind of the most interesting DeSci institutions in a way, even though they're not commonly referred to as DeSci. So.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think it's really interesting, the new models that we're starting to see emerge. I mean, I remember when Danielle at the Thiel Foundation later left to start the 1517 Fund. Is that right? Yeah. And she really had this model where it was like, she really saw that people straight out of high school could innovate and in fact did, right? We saw multiple $billion founders, including Vitalik, right? Who was one of the 20 under 20. A lot of people don't know that from the Thiel Fellowship. And so who could you unleash? What innovation could you unleash with these kind of renegade innovators or renegade scientists? It's a really interesting concept because I think right now we're still struggling, right? In DeSci Pilled, we're exploring this frontier. We're still struggling to really define what is decentralized science? What is it useful for? What is its killer app? We haven't really found that. I think that, there are many of us that see many broken parts of science. Biotech is just one. It was really interesting. We had an episode with the founder, Alex, the founder of Heterodox Labs. And Heterodox Labs is really focused on decentralized science, but helping people set up virtual labs or in-person labs and making other people aware that they even exist in their geographies, right? And it's everything from UFO hunting to, chemistry to physics. One of his personal passions was astrophysics. He basically said the golden era of astrophysics was kind of behind us and we're not seeing these renegade scientists anymore. And so he wants to see if he can find them and help them, connect them to networks. And, he's been thinking about tokens, but that's not his primary driver, right? He's really thinking about how do we emerge these people and then have a place for them to go, right? Can they go to Prospera? Can they get funding when they're, maybe they're a pedigreed founder, maybe they're not. So I think it's a really interesting exploration. And I agree with you. I think that, we have there's a lot of tokens. We all love tokens, especially when the number goes up, number goes down. We don't love it so much. I think we saw that with DeSci recently. I mean, DeSci was, we had a couple of months where it was just incredible. It felt like it was the future. And then we had this massive crash where most DeSci tokens went down, 70 to 95%? Crushed, absolutely crushed. Some to zero, but, real projects just got crushed. Yet there was innovation, right? One of my favorites is Pump.Science. It mesmerized me seeing the studies, the worms, testing in the worms, using AI to track the worms, then using AI to track the flies, and then using AI to track the mice, and these being outsourced labs. It's like, what, imagine if we had this for every therapeutic, right?
Yeah.
And you can just plug into it. You pay for it.
And give me one more contrarian take, right? So the reason we have DAOs has nothing to do with governance. And DAOs have completely failed at governance. They're not innovative when it comes to governance, but they have to pretend to, right? Because we're doing DAOs to tokenize things. Great. But, you can't call it a security, right? So therefore there needs to be like some utility, and okay, therefore we're doing governance, right? So this is why we talk about governance all the time. Now here I have a tip for you. If you want to do the same thing, go to Prospera, right? Because guess what? Prospera does not have an SEC, and you can just tokenize a normal C corporation or LLC and do the same thing. So, and like the legal flexibility there, you don't have to go through all these complex Cayman Islands or BVI or Marshall Islands or Luxembourg or Switzerland or whatever structures, right? So in Prospera, you have the full legal flexibility. And even if like BVI is right for you, you can use BVI regulation for your company in Prospera. So,
yeah, Niklas, that makes so much sense to me. The fact that, equity should be tokenized, so you can actually invest in the company and then and use the same structures that we've used now for, hundreds of years for companies, right? Like there's a reason why companies exist. They were an innovation. They themselves, there was once upon a time where in the US, you couldn't have a company that operated across state lines. It was individual to the companies themselves. And now we're finally starting to see global companies and C Corps and LLCs and things like that. So I love the idea.
Yeah. I think corporate governance has been highly innovative. Like there's been this episode on my podcast with JP Verne, who's the author of a book called The Pirate Organization, kind of showing really how much of governance innovation comes from pirates, comes from the fringes, and how it really evolved through organizations. So many of the early co-ops, insurance, stock markets, there's been tremendous innovation in the world of governance. And if you think of the idea of a company, like a separate legal entity that can cross borders and things like that, it's tremendously innovative if you look at that.
Yeah, no, very, very interesting. And I guess maybe one last thing. I know that I was doing a little bit of research on you, Niklas, and I know you were inspired a lot by, is it Michael Hummer, the philosopher?
Humor, yeah.
Humor, yeah.
H-U-E-M-E-R.
Humor. And what inspired you? Because it sounds like he was a big inspiration to everything that you're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly tangential to what I do, but I think what mostly inspired me is it has like a true... he just solves many of the philosophical mysteries and paradoxes, and has just this like very common sense way to look at the world. Like most philosophers have the tendency to come up with like crazy views, like, oh, I'm a skeptic, we don't know anything, or like everyone has their subjective view or things like that. So you have all these crazy views that you couldn't just live or operate under if you actually believed that. Oh, everything is like predetermined. Yeah, therefore we can't have like law and like responsibility before the law and things like that. Like these are just crazy views if you think about them, how to apply them to the world. So Michael Humor has like a philosophy that you can really describe as common sense philosophy. Like let's start from things that are widely agreed on and kind of take these together and then see that they stay consistent to learn something about the world, so without making all these crazy claims. I just find his philosophy in general, therefore, has just the highest truth value of any philosopher that I've ever read. Like even in history, right? And I think consequently, he also comes to true views about the world. So for example, he just out of random interest wrote an article about longevity. And he came to the conclusion that obviously life is good and death is bad and we want more of it. Just without having anything to do with the longevity industry, just like from a completely common sense philosophy point of view.
Yeah, I mean, that's powerful, right? Because I think sometimes we get lost in the, like the AI argument, like misalignment and you should never bring AI and all, and it's like, well, at the moment, AI seems to be mostly helping. It's a tool, right? And so, using that kind of pragmatic perspective, wouldn't it be amazing if we applied AI to physical work, to curing diseases, to innovation, to science? And then obviously there's some negative effects to that. So I know we're kind of coming up in time. So I don't know if Zoe, I don't know if there's any other thoughts you'd like to share around kind of autonomous zones, innovation, building your biohacker house. Like any thoughts there?
Well, no, just to recap some of the things mentioned in the podcast, I want to highlight the fact that Prospera is a sandbox. Basically, I have been exploring more of the biotech side, but obviously there's also so much more for crypto and other, say, financial and governance structures to explore in this zone, right? So I don't know. I just want to say that the sky is the limit when it comes to different types of platforms and systems that you can try out in Prospera that you might want to then see, extrapolated or adopted somewhere else in the world. I think this is a great place to test out your ideas, show the rest of the world that, hey, there is a way to do things differently that also works, that can be much more efficient. And again, this applies to biotech, this applies to the finance sector, this applies to crypto. So I think it's totally worth exploring, no matter what industry you're coming from.
And Zoe, I guess you would basically say to anyone watching this, thinking about, well, maybe I could do this, maybe to give yourself permission, right? That like no one else is going to, so give yourself permission to go to Prospera. Obviously, make sure you have an invite and you have a place to stay and all that other sort of stuff. But like, give yourself permission to try and innovate outside of that box.
Absolutely, absolutely. High agency people are eating the world right now, so this
100%.
is a great high agency first step. To try.
And Lonis, if people want to go to Prospera, what should they do?
Yeah, they should file an application where they state their CV, and we expect to get back to them after 9 to 14 months, and then we'll let them know. No. This is how typical countries work. So in Prospera, you just show up.
9 to 14 months.
Yeah.
It's like
no, it's
there'll be many no's approved in that time. By the way.
Were you talking about Prospera or the US? Just to clarify.
Exactly. I was talking about my US experience. Yeah. No, in Prospera we believe in freedom, which includes freedom of movement. And so to come to Prospera, you just go to our website and sign up for either a visitor pass, which is free, or an e-residency, which lets you access into the zone for an extended period of time, and it costs $230. And then you can show up. We have residency space, hotels, resorts. So it's very, very easy. Direct flights from Miami and Houston.
Awesome.
And if you want to kind of do it in an event context, we have these monthly Prospera weekends at the end of every month. We have a weekend where you can fly down and kind of meet the Prospera team, have some workshops, etc. And then obviously Infinita have their big conferences soon with the June Crypto City Summit. I believe maybe Niklas, you can say more about that.
Yeah, tell us about it, Niklas.
Yeah, sure. So we have 3 more theme months this year, kind of around the 3 dominating themes in Infinita. June, we have crypto cities, right? So building a city on crypto and creating a 100% crypto native economy, right? So there's various Solana coins in use, there's Bitcoin in use, stable coins in use. You can pay your taxes in crypto. I self-mortgaged my apartment through a loan from Aave. So
amazing.
Crypto.
Yeah.
So that's why crypto cities. Then in August, we do longevity biotech, right? So this is like the heavy science side. We have an academic program with Terence Keeley, Luca Turin, and Marcus Skoulakis. These are all very well-known professors in the field. And then in October, we have human enhancement. So human enhancement is like the quantified self, the cybernetics and chip implants. It's the neurotech, the brain health. It encompasses loads of different topics. So really do these months for startup founders and scientists to explore this in an extended period of time. Right? Because again, it needs that time to really experience the community. It's just not enough to go to like a weekend conference. You get a quick dip in, but really it's the living the part that really makes it meaningful. It shows you what is possible for you, what difference it can make to your life.
Awesome. Thank you, Niklas. That sounds like it's our time. So thank you all for joining. Really excited to go to Prospera. I have not yet been. I will go, I promise. And I can't wait to see what you all continue to build.